and orcs on the rise as war bosses around the universe hear the Great Wall grow with the energy of his great chiefs. Whoa! Welcome to Wall Wednesday. We have stats and the facts, the honorable mentions of this last week's performing orc players, and top player coverage. This week we do have actual notes from the player we're going to be talking about. Shout out to that Git, nice and personal, as they are actually a member of the Wall Tactics community. So we're very excited about this day specifically, but for orcs as a whole, because regardless of if you're a quote unquote meta chaser that's playing War Horde because you love to be big and crumpy, or if you've been playing them since you're just started orcs and you're playing the started detachment, or if you're one of them real cunning gits that just runs one of the other detachments and just has figured it out as more of a master of your style, orcs have found so many different ways to win and play 40k right now. So the best part to some people is that we're not overrunning the meta, right? Everybody's aware of us. We have the respect of the community, but we're not like a big focus of what everybody's problematic child, for example, right? Because whenever orcs on the rise, we automatically get focused on and then brought back down. A lot of people feel that way throughout the edition, to be honest, not just us as orcs, but that's what feels good about where we're at right now. So we're going to be looking at that today. We're going to be excited about how orcs are doing, because as someone, of course, anecdotally, who's been playing orcs for a while, Non's pretty much the only faction I really play ever for years. I've been playing all the detachments, and to be honest, it's even hard to pick one, right? And that's something that if you're paying attention to the meta right now, or as we look at the stats and the facts, so shout out to Stats Hubert. So we're going to be looking at what orcs are doing as a whole. We're sitting at 49%, which is arguably perfect, right? And I hear chat right now, people are excited, people already know what they want to talk about. This is live. I'm reading what you guys are saying, so of course let it be heard. I read them at the end, I read them here, other pretty much all the time, besides when I'm doing the specific one list, because I don't want to get lost in the sauce. But yeah, so of course we're all excited. I'm happy to see people already have some lists in mind they want to see today. But we have the orcs 49, that's like the golden spot. Right when you go above 50, people start to notice you a little bit more, start questioning if you're going to be a problem post next data slate, right? Because once the top people get brought down and brought back into line or nerfed, people go, well, the next guys are going to be a problem. We're not even really in contention for that. We're just sitting at a nice, respectable level. Though that said, vast majority, 163 players, pretty much no other detachment breaking 20, even 20 players, right? So this is a huge discrepancy in the amount of players. It's almost 60% of the player base is just straight up playing War Horde, more than that. So competitively, more than that, far more than that. But that doesn't mean people aren't winning, because as you look at the overall win rates across them, they're almost all sitting at 50% win rate, besides Dread Mob, which is funny because on War Games Live, we've seen a very successful Dread Mob list that was going off on that win rate. So how much lower would that win rate be without our boy Garth out there, right? But Dread Mob, I love you players out there, because I'm a Dread Mob fan myself the entire time since the Codex drop. But let's go talk through these a little bit more. So War Horde, 50%, as it's looking at here, a little bit change. He's rounding up, I guess, when we bring down the faction by. It's been rounded down when it's overall compared to the detachment by detachment. So War Horde sitting at just 50%. Perfect. With really only one big event lineage coming up here. I'm pretty sure that's two, but Statsuber I think has it wrong. He didn't account orcs for it. But because we're not winning a bunch of events, we're just constantly placing, going 4-1, always contesting, always in contention. It means that people are just happy to see us around. It feels like a really good spot as an orc, but yet a lot of people think they can really get out there and win, especially locally. So then we have something that surprises me still, right? Dread Mob, somehow you crazy get Dread Mob, what the heck am I saying? The Big Hunt players, somehow you crazy committed gets the smallest player base of all the detachments. Not surprising, to be honest, because it's so exclusive. Still coming out winning games, somehow brought it up to a 50% win rate, even with just a little bit of point decreases. So kind of proves me wrong, to the shout out to you gets, love that. Cult of Speed, near and dear to my heart. I think Cult of Speed has so much potential. So fun to see him play on the table. Personally, I'm enjoying it so much. It's hard to even choose between War Horde and Cult of Speed. Personally, that's how I feel. You guys let me know in the chat, whoever watches this video too. Post shout out to Rewatch Gang, right? Anybody who watches this video later. you know, are you sometimes struggling with like, I just want to play Dread Mob, but I really like my other detachments and all my other cool models? Or are you cool with just playing War Horde? Sorry, I said Dread Mob. I meant War Horde. Are you guys just cool with playing War Horde all the time, right? You let me know how you feel. But Galta Speed is one of those detachments that's been calling out to me. They're sitting at a 48% win rate, just going toe to toe with War Horde a lot. And a lot of the week in and week out, if you watch this, you know, show or this channel, you'll see that Cult of Speed has constantly been going like total blow for blow with War Horde at getting 4-1, you know, X-1 ratings or and such like that, and people seeing them in teams. It's really nice. Green Tide has snuck back up because there was a moment out there where Green Tide players had just fallen off, right, where they just dropped down to the lowest actual win rate percentage. It was, you know, hurtful to my heart because when I started Orks, it was because of the Green Tide, right? I just like playing mobs of boys. I personally am one of those attrition kind of players. Love slogging through the making you slog through bodies. It's really fun, and I like that it's still being played now, even more so. It's a good meta read, in my opinion. Now, I do think that the difference with Tide compared to other Horde style armies is that we actually hit hard enough to get the respect out of the enemy. With Gaz has actually made sure that we still have that, because once we took increases, then it really just put us in the bad spot. But once you just took Gaz, able to stick with the boy mobs and just kind of push the whole, you know, detachment to a new damage, you know, threshold. You know, it has 19 players. That's the second most played detachment, right? I mean, third. The third most played detachment, but second to of the sub factions, right? We'll just say, because right now War Horde is pretty much the main focus of Orks. But to the rest of the detachments being played, Green Tide is right there above, you know, among the rest. And only recently are we seeing it. I think that's a real meta read. And so we also have Taktikal Brigade, which was something that everybody was really pushing for and excited for, whether you were paying attention to this channel or other channels. But it hasn't really come to fruition, even though I'm really excited for the players who are playing it. Some of the predictions we expected in the community were like, you know, you're going to bring Zod, you're going to bring your Gaz, you're going to find a way to adapt to increases in points and include Gaz into that. We've been seeing all sorts of adaptations, so keep it up with that, you get. And then Bully Boys, just by love, and I think sometimes the simplicity of play. I also think because of its team's potential, Bully Boys is almost always the second most played. I wouldn't say the second most in, you know, win per points percentage or, you know, actual results, but I would say it's the definitely the second most played almost every weekend and week out. But I can see so much love in the chat right now for Dread Mob. So Dread Mob, kind of always known to be the meme. And still people run it kind of as a meme, I think now more than ever. But we all, maybe not all, but a lot of us that are aware of Dread Mob and some other Ork attachments that play them throughout, right? Don't just play the War Horde. You understand how we sat on Dread Mob for a little bit when War Horde was at its worst, when Orks were at its bottom. I think Dread Mob was actually at its best, and it kind of held us there up in the game for some people, and also kept us fun and enthusiastic about the faction. But currently, kind of the worst, and I don't think it's necessarily just because it's rules. I think that it kind of points need to some adjustments. The walkers don't really have a play. You're really infantry based. It just doesn't do anything dynamic enough. Very slow. The game's really movement and fast, speed orientated right now. And I think a lot of the top players have adjusted to playing Dread Mob. I'm sorry, adapted to not playing Dread Mob anymore. So not that I hate it. I love my Dread Mob. You guys know more than most, and probably most channels on all of Warhammer YouTube, that I play Dread Mob. So shout out to them, gits that are out there, and shout out to the Orks as a whole. So regardless of where you're at, what you're moving towards, this is actually encouraging those intermediate players, those beginner players, that if you expand your collection, unlike maybe, you know, a CSM player to a certain degree, right? No offense to CSM players, you guys are awesome. But like, because they have so many sub factions of power armor variations, right? You know, there's a World Eater, there's an Emperor's Children, there's a Death Guard. They have to take one of those identities and incorporate it into a codex. And then it kind of left CSM in a place where it's like, well, now CSM doesn't have more than just one identity, to be honest. Maybe two somewhere out there, but to be honest, it's just straight up, you know, Abaddon, crit 5, shoot people, gun lines, tanks, boom, boom, boom. You know what they do. If you have a nice flushed out CSM, and I use CSM because they're another kind of popular army, they're power armor, they're old, they've been collected for a while. you might just be in the place where you have nothing other to play than just this one style. And if you always played this, and if you've ever been able to play anything else, like maybe jetpack dudes or something like that, well, now you can't play that either because that got taken away from you right away, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're an intermediate or a new player and you're looking at this and you're saying, well, I only have models for War Horde, whenever you're watching this channel, just remember your collection is going to grow. And the fact that orcs are the kind of army we are, with how we play the game based off core strong foundational rule understandings and ability to manipulate scoring the most, and dying for attrition based focused armies with dying for forward momentum. I think that's not taken away from us by simply sticking to certain static rules. And I think that's why it's really hard for GW to box us in into just being trash mode all the time. And you should just flush out your collections and just feel really good as an orc player, I think, to be honest, as we move forward, especially with next edition looking like an orky edition. So with enough ranting on that, let's look at the honorable mentions. So if you want these covered, you're gonna vote on them now. This is for the live gets. Shout out to the live chat. Whoa, and I see you guys right now. I can see you guys are already looking, and people are saying, I want Dread Mob. Well, if you guys want Dread Mob, get voting. All right. And if you want something else, look into it. So it's called saying it right now. We have I put War Horde next to Garth's. Garth Hunt is actually Dread Mob. So I can actually change that real quick for the slide. But yes, so we'll vote. Just Garth Hunt 5-1 for Tacoma is actually a Dread Mob list. So put that in the vote. I don't know why I got fat fingered and put War Horde next to it. Then we have Brandon Owens at 4-1 for Battle Brothers GT Cult of Speed. We have Josh P 6-2 at a 3-day event with his War Horde list, and then we have Nicolas 4-1 with his Green Tide list out of Finland. I believe it was Finland, so I'll check on that. But nonetheless, get your votes in now. I'll adjust that slide when I get a chance here. Maybe live, maybe not. But Garth Hunt is the Dread Mob player that was on War Games Live. And so yeah, we also, I should say now, we have actually covered, if you guys aren't aware, Garth Hunt's before and his performance with Dread Mob before in the past. So you can also check that on the channel if you're really, really interested in how that's done, because he has other slight variations and iterations of this list that we've actually looked at before. So pretty exciting in that. So of course, rewatch gang. If you guys also, and that means people who watch this in the future, say it in the comments. Sometimes I go back, I incorporate a list. If I didn't see it here, of course, let us know and let it be said. So of course, get your votes in. Shout out to them gets and everybody in the chat. Let's see if anybody said anything that I should address right now. Okay, so someone asked a good question that I felt like was, thanks for being here early, by the way, but someone asked a question in chat. He says, if someone yells WAAAGH to GT, do you join in? I would like to think I would, is what he said. Now, regardless of however I answer this, just know I'm on both players' side as for the I do or I do not. So what I mean is, when I first started, I was definitely along the side of I'm going to do that too. I was very, I wouldn't say not just brash, but I was very excited, right? About 40K. I'm very excited about orcs. So whenever I got the chance to join in on the wall, I would, for sure. But then the more I got to know the vast players in the Warhammer community, how a lot of the time, how sometimes factions relate and identify, like relate to a person and help you like relate to them and what they like and such, and their personality traits or flow. And in that state, some people don't want to WAAAGH, don't want to hear so many WAAs, and it might cause a chain reaction of like a negative stipulation against all the orcs and everybody that's playing for you either, right? We're known as the fun faction. We're not pushover faction. We're known as the fun faction for a reason. We're lighthearted, but we're also considerate of the gift we're playing with. So I wouldn't say I now currently, with this knowledge of how the community runs and how their body kind of we all appreciate 40K, I probably wouldn't WAAAGH, just because if it was a bunch of us, we'd probably, like the universe itself, take over the entire gaming hall, right? So all the orcs star WAAAGH and we'd take over the gaming hall, just like if we all got together in the in the actual 40K universe itself. So that's my answer, but it's a fun answer, and I took a lot of time to answer it because it's like that, because it's fun. And shout out to Amazing, because he's actually the one we're going to cover today. So shout out to being in chat. Shout out to Flint, Dread Mob, baby, yeah. And of course, if you're in live here, let you know what you're saying, because I will read these as I go. But now let us move on to the get of the evening. We have Edwin Cho. Shout out to Edwin Cho. He's currently in chat. Amazing. Whoa, look at a wall from the chat. So He's actually been a part of the community for a long time, the Discord, watching the channel and commenting on lives. Love this kid, won some raffles. So very excited personally to see him doing this. I'm a little bit more enthusiastic or excited. You understand why. Of course, I'm a little bit of bias, you know what I'm saying? With that being said, let me get into this list real quick. We do have notes, so he's going to tell us firsthand what we were thinking, and then of course ask him some questions to get some bounce feedback. For more you get, squeeze him for all his that brain juice. And so let's see what he got to say. So we have a beast boss, gotta love it, kind of always fundamental bringing to any War Horde list currently. A Big Mac with Follow Me Lads. He did bring the Drilla and the custom Mega Blasta. I personally love the Drilla because of its 3 damage. It's -3 AP. Not a lot of that in the Orc army. I like to bring some more of that. Why not? Even if it's just one less attack. Hey, he's going on the wall anyways. We all know what's up. We all know what's up. And we hear this a lot. You know, would I rather bring a Pain Boy or a Big Mac? Big Mac seems like he's simply a shiny gunman, like he's not really worth his points or not really understanding his intent behind him. As someone who's been running War Horde, now back on it again because, you know, I like all the detachments. But the difference between the Big Mac and the Gaz is about getting Gaz to exactly where you want him to be more reliably. Being able to actually move Gaz through stuff and over, you know, through enemy rhinos, for example, or screens, or just getting them slightly better in a better position so you can actually get into contact and fights with the units you really want to is very important when you start playing the higher level games, when people are better at screening and really trying to really mitigate what Gaz himself is actually able to get into contact with. So in the reroll advance really helps for that go turn. You don't want to roll that one. So having a built-in reroll is great in that as well. So I think a lot of time that's why we pick the Big Mac, and that's what I hear constantly when I talk about to these gets as well. Then we have Boss Snickrot. He said he absolutely loved Boss Snickrot in this game. He was always very chill, very reliable for secondaries, but he was always very careful with him. So if you're picking up Snickrot, remember, just because he can infiltrate doesn't necessarily mean you need to. Right? Right now, like he's saying in chat, he's won in chat. You know, he was very, very defensive, he said, and he never let people get to him. Was very fine with just leaving him in the backfield for that Boss Snickrot. Gazgo Thraka, like I said, with the Big Mac. Then we brought back a nice, cool tech piece that has been advocated for a lot of the channel, but only the cunning gets really end up teching into it, and sometimes in detachments that's unexpected, like Edwin did today. So as we see, we have the mech, and this mech is because we're taking advantage of that firing deck on the truck, right? So I think as an Orc player, you would, if you're new to 40K, you would overlook this. You go, well, I got pistols, I got shooters, right? And so, of course, if you're familiar and you're experienced, let me just unpack these for some of the newer gets, right? Is the firing deck is very, very useful in most armies, even if it's just 2 spots for special weapon. In this case, because we hit on 5s and we typically have bad, firearms in general, or weapons, Naka in general, people don't even consider utilizing that. They just think of our trucks as only stationary defensive, bunkers in that sense. Yet when you include the mech, now you have a mobile firing platform for those tank busters, and the tank busters don't become exclusively useful against tanks only, or armor in general, right? So when you actually have the truck, and you have the truck around there with either tank busters or sometimes even flash kits, but in this case he had double tank busters units inside of one of the trucks that he was following around, poking so it can shoot better. Very vital to actually threaten firing lanes, threaten enemy transports, enemy vehicles that have DACA that can overwhelm your gas unit too early. So you kind of need that respect, especially on GW terrain, or people just disrespect you on the deployment zone, is what he was saying. And I absolutely love it. Love that he ends up going for that. A lot of the time, I was more of the kind of get that's bringing more trash. And if I brought kind of some sort of DACA, it typically was like screen clearing DACA, to be honest. So I really like to see that Edwin teched into this. Again, like we seen last weekend as well. So the Orks are adapting as well as the meta's going. Even though we haven't peaked out right now yet, you get, like we said, the war energy's growing with the cunning. But we do have a war boss. This was with Ed Wapple's Keel Chopper. A little surprising in that in my opinion, because you're like, well, the dev wounds are only on 6s. I'm not sure if that's necessarily worth it. But hey, for the points, he thought when it's that go time, I just want to do more damage. He would stick this war boss with the breaker boys is typically what he was doing pretty much every game. There's not another target for them anyways on this list. So then we have Zagra Wartsnaga. Yeah. Whoa. Now, you guys, if you've been watching, I'm a little biased sometimes about how I just like Zod a lot. But as you can see, we're getting just more and more results from Zod as the meta is unfolding, as time is unfolding with Orks in the edition. Zod is making more and more appearances at these top table performances. And I asked him, how do you feel about Zod? He said, absolutely love Zod. He keeps the enemies, on their toes because of his continual threat range. A lot of the time he uses them as a screen for Gaz. Once Gaz actually wants to go and pick his target, you don't want the enemies either heroicing or just simply running on the field and running into Gaz immediately after. You can kind of end up manipulating the field in the terms of engagement with Zod a lot. And if you want to see this, I'm going to do an after action report coming out like in a couple days, and I exactly do this with Zod as well in that game. So I'm sure he was constantly keeping enemies on their toes, and that's what people try to use. Movement wins games. Manipulating the battlefield wins games, and Zod is excellent at doing that innately for the low cost. Generally, kind of low cost. Then, of course, 10 Snagas for the Beast Boss, 20 boys for Gaz, the Big Mech. 3 trucks. So one, typically the most consistently reliable number of trucks you want on a GW terrain. If you go more, you pretty much have nowhere to hide. If you go less, you kind of feel a little bit light on trucks. He does have the Breaker Boy and Flash Kits, so that's one SWAT team. The Beast Snagger Boys would be in another truck, and then the Tank Busters, acting as the mobile firing deck, would be in the other truck. Of course, Zod's unit, the big Super Gretchen, then one minimized size unit of Gretchen in the backfield, followed by one unit of Mandos. The only special weapons he had was the Breacher Ram and the Power Claw. So, with that being said, let's take a look at his actual path to victory. And I have my notes that I'll be reading as I go through this. Now, he did go undefeated, but he didn't actually end up winning the event, which is all good. So this was the event he was at. And I'll make sure I'm not going to just read it one-on-one verbatim, but typically you do have to at least unpack it to a certain degree. And shout out to the chats right now. I'll get to you guys. Don't worry about that. So let's look into his first game, which is automatically, as he described it, a nail biter. I'm going to click the right list, right? Sometimes I'll be fat fingering. So this was CSM Renegade Raiders. Yeah, the Fabius Bio, baby. When I said there's 2 ways to play the CSM, this is typically the second kind of common way to do it. So he said this was a pretty interesting. Sorry, let me say one thing. He did say this was layout 1. And going into this game, he was a little bit, worried because it's linchpin on search and destroy. Oof. If you're an Orc player, you're close, you're right on top of each other. The enemy can end up getting initiative on you. But typically we do like search and destroy, but it doesn't mean it's not a stressful game nonetheless, right? Sorry, so I had to include that as we go over this list so you guys can get some context on what he was thinking. So we have Fabius Bio, 1 Lord Discordian Hellstalker, and then a Vashtor, which is kind of interesting to see Vashtor, to be honest. A Cultist Mob, 1 Chaos Rhino, 2 units of Chaos Bikers, 2 units of Predator Destructors, 1 big unit of Chosen, a Forged Fiend, a unit of Possessed, double Venom Crawlers, a Beast of Nurgle, a Noise Marine Squad as an ally, and a Nurgling. So he said it was against the Renegade Raiders. The enemy went first and rushed his naturals with Venom Crawlers. This ended up being a turn 2 WA. And he said ultimately he ended up getting onto his enemy's home base. And Zod stayed back and held his natural expansion. Of Of course, like we were talking about earlier with the orc trucks, how we're using firing decks and such. This enemy was doing that with their noise marines. So they had the truck with rhinos in it. I'm sorry, with rhinos in it. They had a rhino with noise marines in it. And then he also had a noise marines, the Chosen Squad. So if you're not familiar with Chosen Squad, they're like a big kind of elite unit of 3 wound, advance and charge, shoot, advance and charge unit. So they're kind of like their most effective clapback sort of unit, typically being held maybe by Fabius Bile, where then he's going to be able to give them some kind of buff and then kind of blank damage. He's decent on his own as well. He said ultimately on his clapback, the -1 the wound and shooting kept Glav still alive when he charged. Once the Chosen fought the remaining Gaz units, he used Fight on Death, and ultimately he only had Fabius Bile and Fabius Bile 1 Chosen left. He said he was able to squeak this within 1 point. If any of the rolls went anywhere, it would have been it would have been different. So this was one of the games where he was just being honest. This was a nail biter, absolutely close, where it came down to just holding on just enough with all of his assets to pull through in the end and next up killing with that. What he was saying here is that because it was layout 1, he always deployed Gaz on the big L at his home, and then Zagra right in the middle. Commandos were always in the middle, trying to deny area denial and his natural expansion. Utilizes natural expansion. He always deployed Storm Boys for secondaries or for clearing chaff. And then, of course, like we said, the tank busters were the firing lanes. What he did say as well is that the Beast Boss and the tank busters are great for kind of late game play because they're not as reliant on the wall. So this was very much a game that his wall timing came down to Zod and Gaz. Of course, the Breaker Boys were incorporated sometimes, but the cool part about Breaker Boys and War Horde is they can function somewhat without the wall because sustain, crit 5s sustain, which he said he did use them for. In several games, they were his target of that. So, yeah, I think he like he said himself, he really sometimes it just is that way, guys. When we play 40K, right? That's how Orks. You play that aggression. You understand that what the enemy has. But as Edwin chose to, he chose in terms of engagement on the enemy side of the field, knowing the clapback would be possibly spine breaking. He endured it just enough to pull through with his assets and make the difference on the scoring. And like I always tell Orc players, even if the enemy seems to have all the answers for your army and looks like he's going to punish you, the longer you take to get stuck in sometimes, the more damage you do into yourself, especially when the enemy themselves has the ability to dwindle your army, maybe take the initiative from you. You got to go get it, get stuck in, and just let the dice be rolled out. And that's what we're seeing here. That really does win you games at times. And the skill, of course, the cut and get. So let's look at his second game. We go into the Grey Knights. So he said, let's look at this Grey Knights list. It's static Spearhead. I guess I don't really know what that is off the top of my head. We have Brotherhood Tech Marine, Grandmaster with Dread Knight, 2 of those, and then 2 venerable Dread Knights. Okay, I haven't seen those in a while. Double Land Raider Redeemers, and then triple Nemesis Dread Knight. That's funny. Okay, so now this list comes to mind. This is some Index Hammer stuff right here we're seeing you gets. All right, this is what people running in back in Index Hammer with the Grey Knights, where you just bring a bunch of armor and really just play the game like that. We're like, oh, I guess have 2 up armor saves and some fast gets. But as for how he said this one, he said this was a complete blowout because of the nature of the list. He went first, staged up, as in he is in Edwin went first, staged up. The enemy drew Area Denial and Cleanse, so his Land Raiders came closer because obviously all he has is Land Raiders and Dreadnoughts, and Land Raiders are kind of like, well, I'm gonna try to stat check you, and the Beast Boss is like, oh my chopper, so he ended up had to just get close. So he ended up 1 on the top of turn 2, got a big advance on Gaz, crit lethal 5+ across the field. Of course, only one of those units can even use Armor of Contempt anyways. You gotta always keep that in mind for only 1 activation, which is very, very important for us. I swear, sometimes to this day, I'm like, man, that's so much better than it was in the past where it was continuous. And that way, it really messes up the Grey Knight matchup for them. So he just couldn't endure it. He said Zod was able to to tag 2 dreadnoughts, right? So like I always talk about with Gaz and Zod combo is that sometimes Zod is just there to tar pit whatever Gaz couldn't get to yet. That way on the following turn, while they're still beating up Zod, Gaz can go over there and crump him in return. So he ended up holding Zod in place. But ultimately, when there was enough clapback, he did kill. He killed the Gaz brick. Excuse me, he killed the Gaz brick, but he didn't kill Gaz himself. The Zod brick kept the Dread Knights locked down, but they still were kind of at high potential too, because the Dread Knights weren't rolling fast enough to kill them. Ultimately, Gaz finished off the remaining Dreadnoughts, and that was game. So sometimes it just be that way. I love to see that. Whenever Orks just kind of counter armor, you just get stuck in, just roll them over. Fat 100-point win right there. To that you get, love to see it. And then we move on to his third game, which was against the Adeptus Mechanicus. So this was cohort Cybernetica. AdMech is tough, guys. I've been playing against some games against AdMech, and the guy is rusty, but still they're tough games. If they're utilized correctly. So I love to see that. So we have AdMech here still being pretty potent in the meta. So great win with this one. He has a Belisarius Claw, double Cybernetica Datasmith, and then 1 Tech Priest Engine Seer. So we have triple Skitarii Rangers, 1 unit of Sky Stalkers, a big old unit of Servitors. I'm gonna have to ask my AdMech friend how this works. I'm like, wait, I've never seen that. Then we have a Skitarii Infiltrators, double Castellan Robots, and then 3 Disintegrators. So I was just gonna look to Edwin for this notes, to be honest. He said, well, this is a Cybernetica, just a bunch of damage. He was running 2 of those units of robots, and keeping them back because he was trying to be safe and out of threat range of Edwin's Breaker Boys and Tank Busters and the Brick. He still ultimately ended up wawing turn 2. Like I said, most of his entire waw turn is essentially all around Gaz and Zod being able to make contact with units they want to make contact with. So he kept his Tank Busters, his Breaker Boys, and his Snaggers back while he sent forward the big mobs. Remember, Gaz's threat range, because of Follow Me Lads, because of Here We Go, because of the reroll charges, is a minimum going to be 11, on average 14 inches movement, and then you get to do 2d6 charging plus 2, whatever that result is. Very, very nasty threat range. And then you have Zod essentially moving on average the same distance, which means the enemies are going to be completely afraid of even stringing into no man's, because a proper orc player can charge 1 target and then swing the mob into another unit by pile-ins or consolidations and still start tagging everything. So his whole wall turn is really much relying on that. Just keep in mind as you're paying attention to this list, because he did, like he said, keep back his other killy assets, Tank Busters, Breakers, later Snaggers, that way he can kill the robots. Gaz was able to kill 2 tanks, some Rangers, and Sky Stalkers. Zod tagged the other tank, and then ultimately he died to a desperate escape. That's sick. And then since he was dealing with the other 2 bricks the whole game while Edwin was scoring, especially on hidden supplies, it was a good game overall. He said Snickerout was an MVP for establishing and doing a full recover assets. So that's typically what we talk about when we're bringing, this style of list. Any of these mob style lists, from what we're seeing result wise, guys, right? What your preference is totally fine. I'm sure you can play with that and have good results. I'm just speaking strictly on what we're seeing continually, because even though I only show some of the lists, I look at pretty much all the lists, and the vast majority of them are utilizing 2 mobs for that reason. It's not that people can't kill Gaz or can't kill another 20-man unit. It's that while they're killing all that, you're constantly scoring points. You're holding essentially a big wall or line of part of the battlefield, or one big corner of the battlefield, and then you still have other killy assets. And if you build your list, as other people are, with beast bosses, for example, and such, you're able to have damage later outside of the wall. and that's also why we're seeing this mech being adapted adopted, as people are adapting to that fact that they're realizing, well, my big expensive piece, which is like a quarter of my army, then whatever else I have to do because you have to have double, right? You have to redundancy in this mob, at least Marb archetype, meaning then you have to also pay for some sort of other mob. It means you're just stuck on your other assets. That's why I'm really glad that instead of just trying to have tank busters do around and just real and reliable, we got the mech so they can be useful against infantry. They can be used on full side of the wall. They can be, and then he also said, obviously, as a lone op, he was fun for like display of might. Nice to see that. I'm sure that was kind of important. Well, not against that ad mech list, but some ad mech lists that'd be cool too, because you're like, how many list units you got? You guys got a lot of list units. Then we go into this fourth game, which was into the Tau Empire. Oh, sorry guys, someone didn't show you. I know. What's up, guys? I'm gonna get back to your comments. Don't worry, I see you guys chatting. So then we have the Tau Empire, where we was against the Kaoyum. So this was actually, round 4, this was actually layout 2. And he said, depending on the matchup, he would deploy Gaz in the middle and stage Zod, Brick on the bottom with tank busters threatening firing lanes, and always deploy Stormboys 2 down there, and always deployed them on the table. So let's look at what his matchup. He had Commander in Battlesuit, and then a Fireside team, triple broadside battle suits, 1 Crisis Fire Knife battle suit, double Ghost Keel, triple Hammerhead, triple Piranha, Riptide, and double stealth battle suits, and 1 unit of Vespid. Kind of funny because the stupid Piranha in some unideal situation can battle shock you and not allow you to do strats. That's kind of funny. But let's look at Edwin. I just always bring that up because orc players kind of forget about that until they get into it, and then like, oh, that's stupid. So it's just a funny thing. So as for Edwin's notes, he said, up against Kayon, he said he got a really good wall. He was able to touch the Ghost Keel. I think this was a turn 2 wall as well. He said he killed the Hammerhead and the Ghost Keel with Gaz, while Zog touched another Ghost Keel that died to a Desperate Escape. What's up with everybody dying to Desperate Escapes to you, bro? That's awesome. Gaz and Makari lived after the shooting phase and they were alive. They were able to just continuously fight through the enemy's deployment zone. The remaining rounds, the Breaker Boys and the Tank Busters slowly came out and started dismantling the rest of his army. Tank Busters popped out after being inside the transports and killing them. The fun part about Tank Busters, and after they shoot, they'll just start charging stuff as well in the Tau army, and they feel good in that position. I absolutely love that. Letting him maintain his lead and cruise to victory while he essentially was tabling the enemy's army, and Snickrot was scoring behind enemy lines and full engagement, which was huge. That's absolutely sick. These games are going super super ideal in the ways that you're actually executing on what would be ideal for the orc game plan. So I love to see that continue aggression, the redundancy, but knowing that you don't have to expose everything. You have units built in that are able to function outside of the wall, and it has multi-phase potential. So I'm really excited for that. Then we go into his 5th game, which was into another. Wait, was that into his Tau? Did I just make that up? No, because these are commanders. Yeah, I was like, did I just mess that up? No, I didn't. All right. I was like, that's what I thought. Okay. I was like, I double clicked the same one. I've done that before on stream, guys. All right. So then he goes into another Tau unit list. So we have a Commander Farsight, commanders in Coalstar battle suits, 2 Enforcer battle suits, 1 Broadside, Knife Fight, Star Sights battle suits, 2 Sunforge battle suits, a unit of Crew, double unit of Pathfinder, 1 Piranha, double Riptide, and then double Stealth suits. All right, cool. Which was this? Which detachment was this? The Retaliation Cadre. Sorry, I forgot how to read it. So he said this mission was supply drop. He said it deploys Gaz on his home rune. Waited for bottom of turn 3. Love to see that. Those are the kind of missions you can play a little bit more passively, considering you know where the outcome is going to be. He said, force my opponent to death take assets on the objective. That was a disappearing turn 4. The score does not show how close the game was, but it was a heck of a game. Till the primary spike at the end. Bottom of turn on Orcs supply drop is amazing, since he had trucks staged up. He had a middle unit, so the Gretchen to advance into round 4 and OC bomb the middle objective, swing another 15 points. He said ultimately the cadre does have a ton of firepower, and it was one of his favorite games. He was big playing in that play. So that's the other side of this style of play, is that when you read the mission, which there are some ideal missions where people go, no way, wall tactics, you're going to wall turn 3. Sometimes we can see people work forward turn 4 wall. In this case, now that they've removed the challenger cards and stuff like that, secret missions, it feels really great to just say, I'm going to trade my entire army for just standing here and knowing you cannot kill everything, even though you have absolutely the ability to blend one thing on the actual shooting phase, because tower not multi-phase. Once you do that, I'm going to run out, smash into you style of play, that move and start standing there, well, they can't do anything about it if they don't just have absolute efficiency their entire game. Their entire that entire go turn. So surprisingly enough, guys, when you're familiar with how the Tau game's going to go, you really can have some fun games against Tau as Orcs, because you're like, well, nothing really punches me back. So once so it becomes fun like that. So that being, I just start killing people. You're just one face. So I'm not respecting you. I'm touching everything. I'm bad touching everything. And that's what happened. So love to see that. Great job there with that close win. Love that late game play, the late game wall. Always overlooked for Orc players, I'm telling you. But then we move into his round 6, where he was exciting. He said his opponent was fantastic, and it was a great final game. He said he won on the top of turn 2. Oh, guys, I got too excited. I didn't even show you the list. For some reason, I just assumed you knew it was the Tyranids. Did he say what detachment this was, by the way? Because I was looking too, and I was like, what detachment? Let me see. What is that? Oh, this looks like, okay, this is just the monster. Is it the monster mash? This looks like a monster mash to me. I'm gonna assume this was the monster mash. Yes. All right. So we have a Hive Tyrant, a Neural Tyrant, a Lictor, a double Pyrovores, a 3-man and a 2-man. Pyrovores are pretty annoying for work sometimes, right? Double Von Ryan Leapers, a Zoanthrope unit, double Exocrines, double Harlspecs, a Norn Assimilator, a Psychophage, and a Tyrannofex with Rupture Cannon. So let's take a look at the notes. I got ahead of myself, guys. Sorry, I did get ahead of myself. I will say that. Forgive me. He said he won on turn 2. He went to the Harlspecs, Psychophage, Pyrovores, Von Ryan Leapers, and was only able to kill the Harlspecs and the Von Ryan Leapers with Gaz's unit. And he wounded the rest. The Breaker Boys crashed into the Norn Emissary, hitting with a critical 5+ lethal sustained combo, which was huge, and he killed it. That's crazy. That's awesome. That's where the War Horde, the War Boss shining through, being attached to that Breaker Boy list comes into play, because that's a devastating tandem of potential. I love to see that. He said Zod tagged the other unit of Pyrovores. The Psychophage ended up locking down the objective for the opponent. He said his clapback forced his opponent to pull the enemies off the objective and focus on Gaz and Zod being in the middle. Having Art as nails and -1 to wound helped a lot, leaving Zod's unit healthy enough for the primary score on his objective. That's sick. So he was -1 to wound, and then what? Plus another? Did you stack another -1 to wound on that? So that could be, because let's see if they do they have the Neural Tyrant? I wonder. I mean, the Neural Lictor? I don't think so. No. Oh, he just said Neural Tyrant though. Okay, but ultimately he said just -1 to wound. He said Gaz and the Big Mac were the lone survivors and terrorized his deployment zone. That's fantastic. coasting to the rest of the game while the opponent tried to stack up. Again, we have Snickrat just chilling around, doing established and sabotage, scoring them big points for him, and just pulling out through the game. So ultimately, he just had, even though his WAAAGH turn didn't go perfectly, the type of list that the type of faction really Tyranids are, is they're not known for their damage reliability, and dice can sometimes not go their way. So it's really good to, I wouldn't say disrespect their damage, but not overly respect it that you're not willing to smash into them. The double, destroying the Norn with the Breaker Boys, I don't know what the math is on that while their defense is up on an objective, but that's absolutely sick. And I know touching Tyranids is always a good factor. So that was a great job. And I really like to hear how that list ended up playing out overall, because it's a list that I can relate to a lot and has a lot of cool tech pieces and units that I think a lot of us can relate to. So let's look at it one more time. We have a Beast Boss, a Big Mech with Follow Me Lads, a Boss Snickra, Gazgul Thraka, a mech for that mobile truck firing deck, a War Boss with Edwapix Kill Choppa with alongside the Breaker Boys for smashing the spine of a Norn emissary, a Zagra Wartsnaga, 10 Snagga Boys, 20 Boys, 3 trucks, a Breaker Boy, of course with the War Boss, like I said, Flash Kits and the Breakers into one truck, Beast Boss into another truck, and then double tank buses into another truck. 1 Mando unit, 1 minimum size unit of Gretchen, and the Storm Boys. I asked, is there anything you would change? He said, sometimes I consider maybe changing something out of like the Storm Boys or the Flash Kids. Not sure what I would do. I honestly don't think you should do anything with that, whatever that's worth. I do really appreciate having at least 1 jetpack unit that can move around. And when stuff's getting stuck in all over the field, there are sometimes just those games where you're like, yeah, I need this dude to be able to run around and fly and get places I needed to go for scoring or stopping and interrupt heroic intervention to happen, whatever it may be. So I think keep that. Any other questions I asked him that I can think of? I'm reading right now to make sure I didn't miss anything he would change. He said it absolutely is on board with the mech truck and the tank buster combo. He said, like I said, without them, the enemy won't respect you on the firing lanes and just disrespect you from their own deployment zone. He thinks Snickrod is awesome for his lone op nature, making sure he doesn't get jumped. And yeah, Action Monkey Mech, good for display of might. So with that being said, homie, let's see where he's at. He's in the chat right now. He says, and Artist Nails on Gas. That's why, okay, that makes more sense. So between the -1 the moon built in the Zod and Artist Nails on Gas, it was fantastic on his last game. Thanks. I got some. I don't know. That's simple. That's obvious now in hindsight, but when you're alive, sometimes we get ahead of ourselves. So thank you for that. Thank you for the notes. Shout out to the gets in the chat. Like he said right here, that when he started 40K, we were only Orc channel around, and here we are now, man. You made it to the top. Now we're talking about you. Comes full circle, baby. So shout out to Edwin Cho, the great war boss. Whoa, for getting stuck in, lad. Now, let's take a look at the honorable mentions as for the votes. So I'm interested to see what these gets will say, but I'm kind of expecting the answer. So taking a look at the poll, we have a winner, and then now. And of course, I'm going to read the chats before I get into this list, of course, for those guys that were sending chats. So thank you very much to that. But as for the chats, we have a winner with Garth Hunt and his actual Dread Mob list. Let me bring this down because I keep putting the wrong one and now I'm annoying myself. Let's take a look at the super chats real quickly before I go into that one. Thank you for the live chat. Our boy Flynn gifted 5 WAAAGH Tactic memberships. Whoa! So like I said, if you want to see how Edwin used Zod somewhat, I was using him in the after action report we have coming out, which is locking down an enemy that's going to be a problem for guys to get to later. So thank you for that, and thank you for supporting the channel. It means a lot, homie. You've been around always supporting. So we'll make sure we bring forward the content that's worth it. He said, missed gas charges are the bane of my existence. That's why you kind of also need to reroll advance on that mech to make sure you get a closer charge. Nothing can feel worse than what we reported last week when we were short in the Orc player that he missed like a 4-inch charge, rolling a 3 into like a Snake Eyes on War Games Live. That was insane. And so yes, it's the bane of our existence and it hurts our heart. Thank you very much for that. You get And shout out for the love in the other chat. Shout out to all you guys in chat with these other people saying, yeah, the kill saws on the Mac Baby always. So like I said, let me pull up the proper because I fixed that, guys. I can't believe I still had Garth as War Horde. That was disrespectful. Thank you to everyone who's up. What's up, guys? Whoa! I see you guys. Suicide Gambit. What's up? I'll bring up the proper poll because that was ugly, dude. Not having Dread Mob in there. Make sure I'm saying all that and then didn't even update. Let's see. Yeah. Whoa! So Garth Hunt with his Dread Mob at the Tacoma Open ended up winning the vote. So I already have that. Gets. I have his list right here. Yep. And shout out to the other guys that were on this. Honorable mentions, of course. And if you're in the rewatch gang, you can always leave comments if you really want me to look into this list or anything that I didn't look into that you've seen on that honorable mention. There's a chat that gets brought up, right? So let's get into his list. Let me take a drink. Dry throat. Yeah. Oh, I went up again. I'm being biased. Hold on. I have it, but I have it in the wrong spot. Let me get rid of these. All right. Now here it is, Garth Hunt. And I said I'm being biased, but I was actually joking because we've actually covered Garth in the past. He's a beast with Dread Mob. Shout out to the Army veteran here. Whoa, let's go. So that's why green is best he gets. And Garth knows all about that. So we have Garth's list. Let's take a look at this. It is the Dread Mob tried to butt in. So he does have some interesting changes. So even though we've seen this get in the past with this awesome gun lines, this was a fun thing to see and a twist on his list. So we have Bosnick Rat, Gazgul Traka, let's go. Zagrat Wartsnaga. Ooh, we're seeing a bit of a pattern here, you get. And then a Big Mac with shock attack gun with Get Finder goggles. Another 2 Big Macs with shock attack guns, followed by a Baby Mac with smoky gummins. So this Baby Mac unit, guys, he actually can enter a boys unit if you didn't know. And that means he gives the boy unit access to the button, which means if the boy unit uses the button and Gaz is using his crit 5 plus because of the wall or the strat itself, it means Gaz's unit now has access to sustain 5 plus. So we have a pseudo War Horde here. Now, if you force it because of Dread Mob, they're all taking the hazardous chest. But if you just roll it out, there's a chance you can get lethal, and then that might be okay outside of the wall. So then we have 120-man unit of boys, and then a 22-man unit of Gretchen, followed by a minimalist user of Gretchen, and then 2 more 22-man units of Gretchen, which are battle on this detachment. 1 5-man unit of Flash Kits, 3 units of Ludas, all with custom Mega Blastas, and then 3 units of custom Mega Blasters, and then 3 units of Megans, which is funny because I did my tier list, and now Garth's trying to challenge me. No, they still suck. No, I'm kidding. But yes, he has been one of those crazy gits that has been using mech guns this whole time when we didn't have tank busters, and as you see, he is still not using tank busters. Now, most people aren't familiar with this attachment, so I'll just try to summarize it, but I have videos on this and these combos and everything, which I'm definitely a fan of. But to start off, Zod in particular, though we have seen him in War Horde and other detachments, and he has utility. In this detachment, what's funny about Zod is because the Gretchen have a reactive move, it means on the wall turn, Zod has access to a 12-inch reactive. Now, it won't come up. It might not come up for him at all in this his whole path to play victory, but the fact that enemies have to think about this and sometimes actually work around it, because if you let a stupid 22-man size, 22 size unit model reactive move 12, it can totally just disrupt a bunch of different like engagements and parts of the field that you control. So I think that's pretty awesome. Even though it doesn't come up, you definitely let the enemy know, and they'll think about it once in a while. That'll be a big factor in some matchups. Of course, Gift Finder Goggles is for ignore cover on the Ludas. Absolutely amazing. On Overwatch specifically is too. When you get any of these Luda units to actually access on Overwatch, it means whatever defensive ability the enemy has isn't going to be activated because it's not in the in any of the shooting phases. So therefore, you're just gonna have to take it to the face. And these guys are essentially shooting on their natural data sheet profile, hitting on sixes. So it ends up working out anyways in favor of that. Keep in mind when these guys do our shoot, they do have access to big shells for bigger gifts for +1 to wound and +1 damage. So they just put through some nice volume 3 auto cannons sometimes on enemies alongside these shock attack guns, which are just natively letting them reroll ones to hit if they're not shooting on an objective. Of course, good for firing lanes. Again, a lot of range on this list. And then, like I said, with the baby mech, that's what the baby mech is. As for the 22-man units of Gretchen, completely underrated. Completely underrated because nobody actually wants to kill these things. And again, we have the reactive move, and it does matter when the 6-man unit can move again. When people try to come finish it off, right? Typically, they're not going to have the volume to just shoot it away. So then you're like, I'm going to reactive move into you can't shoot me again with whatever remaining of my unit or further away from your charge, and then I'm still going to OC bomb you with this stupid unit. I'm going to get in the way of your charges. I'm going to have a 5-up invuln on the wall. It's actually extremely fun. And I think the big units of Gretchen are completely underrated for sure. And in my Dread Mob, they were common. The 5 flash kits, I think, is because he simply used to bring just a bunch of flash kits and he just had more for points, in my opinion. And then as for the mech guns, the sweet part. So mech guns are kind of annoying as I said that in some way, because how they changed the data sheet from re-rolling once that it doesn't work on vehicles and monsters. So there is an argument that you could put a shock attack gun on these mech guns and then use them in that way. I promise you I've been doing that. I've done it before. Not doing it now. I'm just doing it before. I tend to find the unit to be too expensive and then Ludas are too unreliable, but you could argue they could go either way, that you could with the mech guns and put the shock attack guns with them and then totally use them in that way too, because the mech guns have the ability to utilize a strat to re-roll the entire hit roll. So you could choose one of these mech guns units, spend a CP to re-roll the entire hit roll. Boom, now this unit's kind of cooking. So you're going to have sustain, you're going to have a lethal, and you're going to re-roll the whole hit roll. But then they also can do big shells for bigger gets. So being a strength 9 smash gun, getting +1 to wound, and then making the smash guns going from strength damage 3 to damage 4 with big shells for bigger gets means you have a very fun, like long range anti-tank profile. So you stack these up, Ludas stack up, looking over cross-firing different objective markers, maybe using one for reserves. Gretchen kind of holding your natural or even sometimes threatening your enemies. And then just really having Zod and Gas to just blow up the middle of the field, end up touching the enemies, and he just runs all the mech guns. So I actually love to see it. Now, let me look at his actual path to victory. Now, he was on War Games Live. You can see the actual game where he lost. No criticism, no hate on that. Great job there, but we're still going to look at his path to victory because we get to want to see shots to the chat. Whoa, let's go. Yeah, Garth party right here. Party on Garth. Let's go. Yeah. And I'm excited everybody's happy about this. Imagine he did good, 4-1 with this, and then the win rate overall was still like 39%. So it's hilarious. So first matchup. I won't spend too much time going through everything because I don't have notes from him, but we're gonna look at it. We have Blood Angels, double jump pack captains, a Judiciar, a lieutenant. Which version of Blood Angels? Sorry. Liberator assault group. Okay. Double jump packs, 1 Judiciar, 1 lieutenant, 1 lieutenant with Phobos, and then I said 1 lieutenant, and then there was freaking 3 lieutenants. Of course, right? Look at me. Look at me. Space Marines chill out with the lieutenants. All right, lieutenant, and then lieutenant with Phobos armor, and then lieutenant with combi weapon, which is actually pretty fun to use. We have double impulsors, followed by 2 units of assault jump packs, 2 units of big 6-man unit of blade guard, followed by double lancers, 1 incursor, 1 infiltrator, and then 2 sanguinary yards. One's a big unit. From what I've seen in these similar matchups, because of the amount of firepower and people have to play the mission, you just have so much damage twos and damage straight shooting. Then it just takes a lot of stuff to dislodge the mobs of Grots and Zod and Gaz, and then you're constantly just taking firepower. It's one of those things that they don't have enough dice unless they bring the full weight forward of their army, and then once they do, they're getting tabled. So 98-point win, and that's actually that list because me and Garth have spoke for I believe in the past is trying to remember unless I'm mixing Garth's up, but I've also run this list after seeing it like a year ago though, so not exactly the same, but it felt really good into power armor is what I'm trying to say here. Then we go into the next matchup, which is against a Raven Guard unit. So we have I was written a little funky, you guys, but this was a Raven Guard Shadow Mark Talon. We have Sean. I'm gonna just call him Sean, okay? We'll just call him Sean. We have Caven Shrike, Captain with Jump Pack, Lieutenant with Combi Weapon, Double Devastator, Assault Squads, but one of them is a large unit. A Inceptor unit as a large unit of Inceptors. What was he carrying? It didn't say what he had, but I assume plasma. 2 units of Scouts, followed by a Vanguard Veteran Squad as a 10-man, and then a 5-man, an Invader ATV, and then a Storm Speeder Thunderstrike. So typically this army is like, I'm just gonna go all over the field. And you're gonna have a hard time with my shenanigans and getting a hold of me. It's true for a lot of people, but one this list is really good at never worrying about screening its own side of the field. And as it continues to march forward with the amount of bodies, this army is going to bring its full momentum forward at some point. It's going to have to nail itself down to just deliver the damage to the mobs, to the Gretchen, to the Zod. And then you also have Gaz, which the whole wall simply relies on Gaz and Zod yet again. Which means when you get a leap and jumping forward pad of something they can get a hold of, you're gonna have to commit, and when they have to commit, then you're dealing with a bunch of smash guns and ludas, and the fights are happening on objectives because typically orc players are having these fights on objectives to incur these sort of shooting contexts too. So it's pretty awesome. Not to mention you have overwatches that can happen here. Very uncommon things that are going to be available to Garth in this matchup that people are just simply not expecting from orc players. I mean, maybe even one of those reactive movements from the Grots might be interesting. Like I said, I love having reactives, and in that kind of matchup, I think it would be interesting too. Then we move into, because with the 20-man units, not that it happened in this game, but the 22-man units of Grots, when they reactive move, because of how big the bob takes up, you can kind of screen a little bit from jump pack units too. Just create like just a big pocket of you can't land here. But 88-point win. Great job there. Then we go into the third matchup, which is against Space Wolves with Stormlance. We have Arjek Rockfist, Bjorn Fell-Handed, Lieutenant with Combi Weapons, and Logan Grimnar. I only say Bjorn correctly because I got bullied enough by my European friends, so thank you for that. We have Intercessor Assault Squad, Double Assault Intercessor Squads, Infiltrators, some Reavers, 3 units of Thunderwolf Cavalry, but one of them is only a 3-man unit. It's funny how this is laid out because there's a big, then small, then big, right? We all hate that, right? Then we have Vanguard Veterans with jump packs, double those squads, followed by 2 big breaks of Wolfguard Terminators. This list is not, big brain, right? And no offense, this is just straight. I'm a lot of meat. We're a lot of 4 bin phones, and we're just gonna take whatever damage you have on the chin and then run up in your face. The cool part about this, I think, adaptation of Garth's War Horde list. I mean, War Horde list, Dread Mob list, which is so different than the War Horde list is the multi-phase potential of it, but you still get the best part of what everyone's teching into with War Horde, which is I still get Gaz, I still get Zod, I still pretty much declare the wall exclusively for them, but everything else on my list doesn't care about the wall, has stratagems that can benefit from him. And I have a bunch of just redundancy in this firepower that I have as well. That's very fun, and that means when you're dealing with these space wolves in this case, it means you're just constantly laying the dice on them, which is really challenging. The fact that typically they're really trying to counter efficient, low volume of high damage dice. They're saying, I'm just going to start taking these invulns, and I don't have enough, I have too many wounds, so you can't get them through nicely. In this case, you're just like, here's 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage. Whoa! It just becomes fantastic. So 96 point win there. Right. I love shooting Ludas at Thunderwolf Cavalry, for example. Right. I'm like, oh, I only have 1 AP anyways, bro. So I love it. Then we go into his fourth game, which is the one where he actually lost. War Games Live, which against Tau Auxiliary Cadre. So Cold Star Commander suit, Cold Star battle suit, an ethereal, double ethereals, Crisis Knife battle suit, a Ghost Keel, Carnivore, double Crute Rampagers, a Torox Rider, a Pathfinder, double Riptide, double Skyray gunships, double Stealth suit, double Vespid. So I didn't watch the game as meticulously as I've watched other games that I've seen on there, so I can't tell you the pivotal swing moment necessarily. But what I can say into going into this matchup is, one, Tau actually has okay trading potential and pieces with its tanks and its firepower. Two, the mech guns didn't really seem to be going off in the game that I was watching out. So, Tau have a lot of stuff that they're willing to lose, we'll say. Which means that they'll let you kind of try to take off on one of their tanks. And if this does happen then they're going to just start picking up whatever, try to respond to them. Then you also have the amount of chaff getting in the way sort of units as well. You have stealth suits that you're not going to necessarily be able to shoot away too easily, but they're going to be taking the midfield. Decent at chaff clearing and sometimes OC bombing, getting in the way with Vespid even potentially. And ultimately, these Crute Rampagers give them something they typically lack, would be counter charges. But from what I could tell, it was still a close game. Dice sometimes tell games and dictate games, and sometimes Dread Mob just be Dread Mobbing, where it doesn't actually do the thing it's been doing consistently over and over again, which is from what I was paying attention to and seeing what was happening on that War Games Live event. So it was actually pretty awesome when I was watching. It caught everybody in the world, that was watching at least off guard, that they're like, dang, Orks are out here with with the Dread Mob. But yeah, it was a good game, and ultimately I think people that are really interested in watching War Games Live exactly how it was going down, and they ended up losing in the nutshell, but as a whole. But yeah, it sometimes goes. I think it was also Purge off the top of my head. I don't know. I should actually have written that down. I don't know how I messed that up. I'll go look though and make sure I see that. Then we go into the second last game that actually makes a comeback for, which against the Drakari. So we had, which is actually a tough matchup overall. Like not every Orc army or whatever, but it's a respectable detachment. I mean, a faction currently. In my opinion, I think it can go a long way. I think that in the right player's hands, and I think people should be aware of it when they're going into the matchup, that it can actually counter Orcs. But and it's not something I would say that was always the case before, personally. So cool. We have Drakari, we have an Archon, Lady Molest, Slilax, Succubus, one Cabalite Warrior, some double Witches, a Raider, triple Venom, triple Hellions, a Mandrake, double Reavers. Sorry, is it double or triple? That's triple. Triple Reavers, but one is a minimum size unit. And then double Scourges. I guess they got rid of those Beastmasters and stuff. I don't know, pay attention to that recently. I'm not sure the exact meta of these gets, but pulled an 80-point win there. I think when you actually have a bunch of stuff that they have to dig through, plus you have the firepower to clean them after they do their thing, because they're relatively squishy, and then in a pinch you could end up getting the Ludus to run up and start getting in the fight too. So I can see how this was a decent matchup, and you don't have to be in combat and taking fights first or taking battle shock tests and then hoping that you get to do your automatic combos of fight on death against these Drakari and getting the trades you would typically want into the melee matchup. So yeah, I think that that's why it could be overlooked sometimes as like, oh, this is a good matchup for Orcs, but there's a lot of dice rolls that come into play in these games if you're doing like a typical War Horde matchup. And I think that's what's the cool part of the strength of his list right now, being a multi-phase I can play with shooting and DACA sort of thing. So great job there. And then we go into his last game. Sweet Lou. We have World Eaters, Demonkin. So we have a Demon Prince of Khorne, Karn the Betrayer, Lord on Juggernaut, a Scarbrand, and a Slaughterbound. One Bloodletter unit, one Time unit of Khorne Zerkers, a big brick of Skull Crushers, one Chaos Spawn, one Exalted, one Forge Fiend, a Hellbrute, and then double unit of Jackals. So I haven't played against this attachment in a while, but I think from what I remember, Dreadmob does pretty well because pretty much I only fight kind of army, and once it's exposed, you kind of dictate. You do have to be careful of something like a Hellbrute, for example, which will fight through a unit and then continue to fight through multiple units. But that's where like a stupid, Gretchen comes into play, or taking advantage of a reactive move, not letting these people get a hold of you, and then you just have good multi-phase potential into them. So I don't think too many wrinkles into that game from the changes that detachment took. But 86-point win there. So shout out to Mr. Garth and his Dreadmob list. Absolutely love to see it. He did have 10 points left over for anybody who's looking to adapt or integrate that list into what they play. Really cool to see those tech pieces and those tools. I think he did a great job overall, and even at the event, everybody was talking about it. Overall, and like telling me about, oh, look, there's this crazy Dreadmob player that's going on right now. So yeah, I thought Orcs were just sick in that way, that we just it's funny because you'll not hear or see a detachment for a long time, and then boom, it just pops out, starts going off, taking out people's left and right. It's just, making appearances, and then people are like, what the heck is that thing? I've never even seen that detachment. Then it'll just go away, and then that crazy Orc player that you've seen will just not appear again, and you just won't know where that list came from. And that's kind of who Garth Brooke is in himself and him and his Dreadmob. So thank you for that. And with that being said, that's it for that, Gip. And so, with that being said, Orcs are doing great. It's a little bit longer on this episode because we had some notes and some exciting moments. So thank you guys and Rewatch Gang. So of course, be on the lookout for our after action report and the stuff coming up this week. We're gonna take a look at the World Championship Orc list. We got about 14 lists out there, and I think it's going to be great to see what is going to the top, what people think that they can shake the world up with the Green Tide, with the Bully Boys, with the Cult of Speed, with the War Horde, because believe it or not everyone that's taking the best Orc, not all the best Orc players in the world going to World's events are taking War Horde. All right, they're playing a multitude of detachments. So with that being said, there's always one thing to keep in mind: is don't cross our wall, because we'll knock your teeth out. Ooh.